remember it as if it happened just yesterday. I was on my way home after a late shift, the night eerily silent around me. Suddenly, the familiar route I always took was closed off, forcing me to take a detour through an unfamiliar stretch of countryside. The road wound through dense woods, a setting so different from the open roads I was used to that I found myself on high alert, scanning the darkness for any signs that would keep me on track. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. A woman, her clothes torn, was frantically signaling and screaming for help. Instinctively, I braked to a halt. She rushed over, tears streaming down her face, claiming she'd been in an accident and her friend was still trapped in the wreckage. My immediate thought was to call for help, but as I glanced at my phone, I realized I had no signal. I was at a loss, unsure of what to do next, but her pleas for help spurred me into action. I agreed to follow her into the woods, hoping I could offer some assistance. However, as we ventured deeper, a nagging feeling began to grow within me. There were no signs of an accident, no broken branches, no skid marks, nothing that indicated a recent crash. The realization that I might have walked into a trap hit me like a ton of bricks. I stopped dead in my tracks, and at that moment, two menacing figures emerged from the shadows, charging towards me with weapons in hand. Panic surged through me as I understood the grave danger I was in. I turned and ran as fast as my legs would carry me, the sound of my own heartbeat thunderous in my ears, nearly drowning out the sounds of their pursuit. Every second felt like an eternity, each breath a struggle as I imagined being caught. Then something struck my arm, a sharp pain, but my fear was so intense that it barely registered. All that mattered was escaping. Miraculously, I made it back to my car, flung myself inside and locked the doors. But before I could even catch my breath, one of the back windows shattered. Adrenaline took over. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, not daring to look back until I was miles away. Only once I was safely home did I allow myself to assess the damage. My arm was bleeding from where I'd been hit, a stark, painful reminder of the night's terror. The next day, I reported everything to the police, but despite their assurances of an investigation, there's been no follow-up, no closure. I can only hope that no one else makes the mistake of stopping for that woman on the deserted country road. Driving alone at night has always given me an uneasy feeling, but nothing prepared me for what happened one winter evening. I was returning from a friend's house in a rural area, the roads slick with ice and snow. The darkness was almost suffocating, with only my headlights cutting through to illuminate the path ahead. It was so cold that the air itself seemed to freeze, creating a silence that was both serene and eerie. As I navigated the winding roads, a figure suddenly appeared on the roadside, a man waving frantically for help. Instinctively, I slowed down, the icy conditions making me wary of stopping too quickly. The man approached, his breath visible in the cold air, as he explained his car had slid off the road and was stuck in a ditch. He pleaded for my help, his eyes wide with desperation. Against my better judgment, I agreed to help him. There was no cell service in this remote area, so calling for a tow truck wasn't an option. I followed him down a narrow, snow-covered path, my heart pounding, the quiet only broken by the crunch of our footsteps on the snow. As we rounded a bend, I expected to see his car, but there was nothing, just more snow and trees. A spike of fear shot through me as I realized there was no car, no ditch. It was a trap. I turned to confront the man, but he was no longer the desperate figure I had seen on the road. His expression had changed. There was a menacing look in his eyes now. I didn't wait to find out what he planned to do next. I turned and ran back towards my car, slipping and stumbling on the icy path. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps quickening as he chased after me. My mind raced with fear, thoughts of what might happen if he caught me. By some miracle, I made it back to my car, locked the doors and started the engine. I glanced in the rearview mirror to see him standing in the middle of the road, watching as I drove away. I didn't stop driving until I reached the safety of my home, my hands shaking and my heart still racing. The next day, I reported the incident to the police. They told me there had been similar reports in the area of someone trying to lure lone drivers into secluded spots. They thanked me for coming forward and assured me they would investigate. That night changed the way I see those quiet, lonely roads. Now I avoid driving alone at night whenever possible, and I'm much more cautious about stopping for strangers. was different. A dense fog had descended, shrouding the landscape in a ghostly veil, turning familiar landmarks into shadowy figures that barely resembled their daytime selves. As I navigated the serpentine roads, a sudden detour sign loomed out of the fog. The main road was closed, and I was forced onto an unfamiliar path. The further I drove, the worse the visibility became, and the more disoriented I felt. The GPS had lost its signal, leaving me to rely on instinct and the dim reach of my headlights. An unease settled over me, a prickling sensation that I wasn't alone. Every now and then I thought I saw movement just beyond the edge of the light, but when I looked directly, there was nothing. The road seemed endless, and the further I went, the more I felt like I was being led away from civilization into the heart of darkness. Then the car sputtered and died, leaving me stranded in the suffocating silence of the fog. I tried to start it again, but it was futile. My phone, my only lifeline, had no signal. I was utterly alone. As I sat there, trying to quell the rising panic, I heard it for the first time. A soft, dragging sound like something being pulled across the gravel just out of sight. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I heard a tap, tap, tap against the window. I was too terrified to look, to confront whatever waited in the fog. The tapping grew more insistent, moving around the car, always just out of sight. I realized then that the road had taken me not just through the physical wilderness, but into a realm of fear I had never known. The night had stripped me of my bearings, my safety, and now it seemed it was coming for me. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed by fear, before the sound finally ceased and the fog began to lift. The first light of dawn revealed a deserted road, with no sign of the terror that had stalked me through the night. I eventually managed to start the car and make my way home, but the fear of what lurked in that fog stayed with me.